A powerful CEO suddenly collapses in the middle of a luxurious restaurant. A poor waitress rushes to save him as the crowd watches in cold indifference. But when he tries to repay her, she boldly refuses. From that moment on, two opposite lives are entangled in an emotional game where no heart is held without a price. New York, 9:30 p.m. The clinking of cutlery echoed through the elegant space of Leclerc restaurant, where flickering candlelight danced on the surfaces of swaying red wine glasses, and the strains of classic jazz gently seeped into the soul, mingling with the faint scent of truffle in the air. Amid this opulence, Emily Parker hurried past the rows of tables, her black apron tied neatly around her waist, the soles of her worn-out server shoes testament to 10 hours of relentless standing. She had no time to feel tired, though her aching feet begged to give out. Another workday was nearing its end, and if she could just earn enough tips tonight, she'd be able to cover next month's tuition for her little sister Chloe. A sharp-aimed 12-year-old with a hunger for learning, as if she were carrying the dreams of their late parents on her small shoulders. Their parents had died 3 years ago in a car accident during a harsh winter. Emily had just turned 23 then, barely given the chance to live her youth fully before she was forced to shoulder a crumbling world. She chose not to cry for too long. Chloe needed a strong older sister, not just an emotional anchor, but someone to provide every meal, every textbook, every pair of school shoes. Table 12, VIPs, the manager whispered as he passed by, his eyes betraying a flicker of anxiety. Emily nodded, smoothing her disheveled hair and quickly wiping an ink smudge from her finger, a careless mark from jotting down an order. Table 12. 4 men in high-end suits conversed in a language foreign to her world. Terms like parent corporation and strategic shares conjured images of towering glass buildings she'd never set foot in. One of them made her pause. The man seated in the center, mid-30s, with a chilling gaze and a handsome face that didn't smile, seemed utterly detached from everything around him, save for the phone in his hand. Ethan Cole, the name printed on the reservation slip, CEO of a renowned investment firm, and also the man about to storm into her life like a hurricane. Emily didn't know that yet. All she knew was that she had to serve Table 12 well, keep smiling despite the turmoil in her chest, as Chloe's text buzzed in her mind. "Sis, I need to buy a chemistry book next week. It's required." Her eyes dimmed for a moment. That book would eat up half the tips she'd earned tonight. But since when had she balked at sacrifice? If it came to it, she'd skip a few meals, as long as Chloe could keep studying, keep dreaming. In a corner of the candle-lit restaurant filled with laughter and clinking glasses, no one noticed a story beginning to unfold. A story not about fine wine or corporate shares, but about 2 people who seemed destined never to cross paths, one struggling to hold everything together, and the other falling apart in a way no one could see. The faint clink of glass against glass rang out like a bell, in a symphony layered with sounds, the clatter of plates, the soft laughter of couples, the animated chatter about multi-million-dollar deals. Yet amid all those noises, Emily could still hear her own heartbeat, clear as day. She approached Table 12 with a tray of wine, her posture straight, a charming smile fixed on her face, though her mind wrestled with how to afford Chloe's chemistry book while still covering the rent. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice gentle yet professional. "Tonight we have a highly favored burgundy if you're interested." 3 of the 4 men completely ignored her, engrossed in their debate over profits, stock valuations, and market strategies. But the man in the center, Ethan Cole, suddenly looked up, just for a second, long enough for his gaze to meet hers, and Emily froze. Those eyes weren't as cold as she'd assumed. They were empty, dangerously empty, as if he stood in the eye of a storm, the whirlwind within having stripped away every trace of feeling. Ethan returned to his phone, his voice flat. "Chateau Margaux, 2015, and water for everyone." Emily nodded and stepped back, but not without Stealing another glance, she saw him twist his wrist, loosening his tie. A small gesture, yet it sent an odd jolt through her chest. A minute later, returning with the wine glasses in hand, Emily stopped short a few feet from the table. Ethan sat motionless, his right hand pressed against his left chest, lips pursed tightly. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead, despite the cool hum of the air conditioning. No one at the table noticed. They were too busy arguing over percentage points of ownership, as if the entire world revolved around numbers. Emily saw what no one else did, a collapse creeping in. Her heart pounded. She set the glasses on a nearby table and stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir, are you feeling all right?" Her voice was low, soft, but firm. Ethan tried to respond, but only managed a few incoherent syllables. Then, he crumpled. It all unfolded in seconds. Spoons stopped clinking, laughter faded. A cold breeze slipped through an open window. Emily lunged forward, catching him before his head hit the floor. "Call 911, she shouted, her other hand gripping Ethan's shoulder, feeling the chaotic rhythm of his heart beneath his expensive shirt. No one moved. Servers, patrons, even Ethan's 3 colleagues. They all stood frozen like wax figures. Only Emily acted. She loosened his collar, placed a hand on his back, and whispered, "You're having a panic attack. It's okay. Breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth." Ethan looked at her. Gone was the gaze of a CEO, the aloofness of a man in power. In its place was a lost, frightened, desperate man, clinging to her hand like a drowning soul grasping at straws. In that moment, amid the scent of expensive cologne and the glow of soft golden lights, an invisible thread tightened between 2 people from utterly foreign worlds. One who didn't yet know he was losing control, and one who never imagined her life would change, simply because she dared to step forward when everyone else turned away. 3 days after the shocking incident at Lake Claire, Emily thought it would all fade into the past like so many other nights. As usual, she returned to her small apartment in Queens, warmed milk for Chloe, helped her with homework, then sat in front of her old laptop to check her paycheck and plan her next shifts. Her modest but disciplined life continued to hum along its strict routine, until the restaurant manager, his face pale as paper, leaned close and whispered in her ear, "Emily, Ethan Cole is in the VIP room. He's asking for you." Emily stood still for a moment, as if she couldn't believe her ears. That panic attack, those frantic eyes, the way he'd gripped her hand like a man adrift at sea. It all came rushing back like a slow-motion reel. She untied her apron, smoothed her hair, and stepped into the quietest room in the restaurant. There he stood, Ethan, Cole back straight, clad in a deep blue suit, tie impeccable, as if that fateful night had never happened. "Miss," he began, leaving a pause for her to fill in her name. "Parker. Emily Parker," she replied, striving to stay calm, though her heart rattled like a door in the wind. "Emily," he repeated slowly, as if carving her name into his memory. Then he pulled a small envelope from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table between them. "This is a thank you. I don't know what would have happened that night if you hadn't stepped in." Emily glanced at the envelope. It was thick, unmistakably so. She could guess the value inside wasn't trivial, but she didn't reach for it. "I can't take this," she said, her voice soft but solid as stone. "I only did what anyone would have done if they saw someone panicking and about to collapse. But no one did anything. Only you," Ethan said, frowning, a hint of impatience breaking through for the first time. "I can make your life easier. Don't reject kindness." Emily took a deep breath. Her eyes didn't waver, didn't flinch. "It's because you can help that I can't accept. I don't want to be another name on your list of people I've helped. I'm not an entry in your ledger." The air thickened. Ethan leaned back, studying her as if she were an unsolvable equation. "You're too proud," he said slowly. "Or maybe you're scared." "No," she countered. "I just don't want to turn a real moment into a transaction." A long silence stretched between them. Emily stood. "If you really want to thank me, slow down a little. And don't forget to breathe." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "There's another way, a fair proposition. I'm looking for a new executive assistant." He fixed his gaze on her. "You're quick, observant, calm under pressure. I'd like you to try out for the role." Emily turned back. Her eyes widened. "Are you joking? I'm a waitress, not some Ivy League grad. Even better, I've got plenty of people with credentials. What I lack is someone who can see past the surface, like you did that night." Her heart skipped a beat, but she kept her guard up. "And if I say no?" Ethan smiled. A cold, steel-edged half-smile. "I won't force you, but you'd be passing up a chance to change your life." Emily lowered her head, her hands clenching behind her back. This offer, it wasn't money. But it wasn't free of strings, either. If she took it, would she lose something deeper within herself? Ethan stood and stepped closer, his gaze softening slightly. "Think about it, Emily. I don't need gratitude. I need someone who will say no to me. You just did. You've got willpower, something I can't buy." And before her reason could stop her, she said, "I'll think about it." As she left the VIP room, her heart raced wildly. She knew, from that moment on, her life was no longer a straight path. An offer, a first crack, and a psychological game between two worlds about to begin. A week after that bold proposal, Emily stepped into the towering glass building of Cole Enterprises, where everything reflected light like razor-sharp blades. She wasn't dressed in a designer suit or glossy high heels like the other assistants. She was still Emily, wearing a fitted white blouse, old but neatly pressed trousers, her hair tied back in a tidy bun, and her eyes always alert. Ethan Cole merely nodded when she entered his office. No formal greetings, no polite smiles, just a stack of files already placed on the desk and a curt instruction: "Start now. 8 a.m., no delays." Emily didn't react. She sat down, opened the files, and began working as if she'd been doing it for years. "In those early days," Ethan said, "little beyond work matters." He was precise, sharp, demanding, and entirely unemotional. But Emily wasn't intimidated. She quietly observed, learning to read between the lines of his emails, anticipating his schedule, and sometimes even sensing when he was on the verge of exhaustion he refused to acknowledge. She didn't win Ethan over with gentle words. It was her cold precision, mirroring his own, that did it. She adjusted his meeting schedule before he asked. She brought him coffee just the way he liked it, at the perfect temperature. She stood before him like a mirror, reflecting the loneliness he tried so hard to hide. And then, an unspoken bond began to creep into the gaps between them. One night, as they worked late under the golden glow of the ceiling lights, Emily gently placed a cup of tea on his desk and whispered, "You haven't rested for a minute. The heart isn't something you can ignore forever." Ethan looked at her. His gaze was no longer that of a boss to an assistant. It was the look of a man seeing in her something the world had denied him. Truth. "You haven't rested either," he replied softly. "True," she smiled. "But I'm not the one who nearly collapsed in the middle of a fancy restaurant." And for the first time, Ethan laughed. A real laugh, slightly hoarse, tinged with surprise, as if he'd forgotten what it felt like. From that day, they talked more, not just about work, but about small things. Chloe's favorite books, Emily's time working at a childcare center, Ethan's inability to cook and habit of skipping meals. Fragments of life began piecing together into something worth holding on to. But just as their hearts started to open, fear quietly knocked. One weekend afternoon, Emily overheard two employees whispering as she passed through the hallway. "That new assistant. Guess what? She's the one who saved Ethan when he fainted at Leclerc." "Oh, really?" Then the game's on. Everyone knows Ethan always repays favors in his own special way. The sly laughter that followed cut into Emily like a thin blade, piercing deep into her chest. She stormed into the room, slamming the door behind her. Her heart clenched, not from anger, but from the doubt seeping into what she'd thought was real. She looked at Ethan, engrossed in reviewing contracts, oblivious to the shift in her gaze. "Did you tell anyone about me? About what happened at the restaurant?" Ethan looked up, slightly taken aback. "Just PR, and maybe a few people internally. Why? What's wrong?" Emily fell silent. A small crack tore through the space between them, invisible but razor-sharp. Ethan didn't understand why she suddenly withdrew, but from that day her voice grew more distant, her eyes avoided his, and the goodnight wishes at the end of the day vanished. He tried to restore their old rhythm, but emotions can't be commanded like contracts. And deep within Emily a question gnawed. If every kindness comes with conditions, then this feeling, could it be part of some plan? She began rebuilding her walls, and Ethan, for the first time, felt himself losing control, not over work, but over a woman who dared to make him fear losing her. Chloe's study room smelled of fresh paper, a chemistry textbook, a set of highlighters, and a brand new backpack sat neatly on the desk. Emily stood, silently, staring at the gift as if it had just fallen from the sky. A letter from the school came with an announcement. "We are delighted to inform you that student Chloe Parker is the first recipient of a full scholarship from the Young Futures Fund, covering tuition, books, and related expenses until high school graduation." No signature, no donor's name. Just a stranger's name heading the fund, Cole Legacy Foundation. A shattered piece of memory quietly clicked into place. Cole. She didn't need to ask more. No text, no consultation, not a single conversation, just a decision. Wrapped in the guise of goodness, but beneath it lay an anonymous imposition. That night she stood outside Ethan's apartment, her hands clutching the scholarship letter like evidence, like a small knife plunged into the fragile trust that had begun to form between them. Ethan opened the door, still in his unbuttoned shirt, his eyes widening in surprise at her unannounced arrival. "Emily, you did this behind my back." Her voice was dry, skipping pleasantries. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She tossed the letter onto the table. "Cole Legacy Fund? Clever name, pretty, anonymous, kind, but still control. Still, I know what you need, so I'll take care of it." "Ethan, I made it clear from the start. I don't need you to rescue me." He stepped forward, his tone softening. "Emily, it's for Chloe, not you. You said you wanted to take care of your sister, and I just wanted to help." "Help? Or prove you can fix everything with money?" Her voice sharpened. "Even me, even my self-respect." Ethan froze. For the first time, he didn't know how to respond. "Do you think that makes me feel what?" She pressed on, her eyes glistening. "That I'm a project? A debt? A pitiful orphan you feel sorry for?" "No, it's not like that." Ethan stepped closer. "Emily, I did it because you don't know how to love someone without trying to own them." That sentence, it was a cut, and it struck Ethan right where he was most vulnerable. He turned away, hands bracing the table, head bowed low. Silence, heavy as the darkness before a storm. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I just don't know how to do it any other way. My whole life, everything has had a price, a contract, a result. You're unlike anyone I've ever met." Emily stepped closer, her voice softening for the first time in the exchange. "You're right, I'm not like them, and I don't want to be part of a world where every kindness comes with conditions." A hush fell between them like a thick velvet curtain. "I'll leave the company by the end of the week," she said. Ethan spun around. "No, you can't do that. I have to," she whispered. "If I stay, I'll always feel indebted. And that will kill the most beautiful things that just started between us." Ethan moved toward her, grabbing her hand. "Give me a chance to make it right, Emily, please." But she stepped back. A small step, yet to Ethan it felt like a chasm had opened between them. You need to learn to love without controlling. And I need to learn to walk away when feelings start to twist." Emily turned and headed for the door, but then paused. She didn't look back. "You once said I dared to say no. Today, I still do." Ethan stood there, not chasing after her. No more pleas. Only the soft sound of the door closing echoed like the end of something that never fully took shape. That night, neither slept. One stared at the city lights, thinking of her eyes as she walked away. The other held her sleeping sister, but her heart felt as empty as a room without laughter. This ending, no gunshots, no tears, just a simple, aching truth. Love, if you don't know how to hold it, sometimes slips through your fingers, even when you never let go. 3 weeks had passed. 3 weeks without Emily in the office, in his messages, in the rhythm of Ethan's life. The desk beside his now sat bare, save for an inkless pen and a moon-shaped ceramic mug, the only thing she'd left behind, like a tender wound that refused to heal. She took nothing. No money, no title, no glory. Only his peace of mind. At first, Ethan did what he always knew how to do, buried himself in work, packed schedules, endlessly updated plans. He thought busyness would fade the memories. But he was wrong. The busier he got, the emptier he felt. The more he spoke to others, the more he missed one voice. One late evening, he sat by the glass window of his apartment, the city below still glittering with lights, but inside him, only a cold gray. For the first time, Ethan realized he didn't know what to do without power. No contract to sign, no meeting to turn the tide, just a girl who'd taught him to breathe again, then left. On Monday morning, Ethan appeared somewhere no one expected, a small counseling room tucked away on a quiet street, far from the glass skyscrapers. "I don't know why I'm here," he admitted, sitting on a soft leather chair, his eyes avoiding the person across from him. "Maybe because you've just lost something important?" the elderly doctor asked gently, squinting. Ethan didn't answer, but something inside him began to crack. Over the next few sessions, he learned to name his fears. Fear of being left. Fear that without control he'd lose everything. His mother had walked away without a word, leaving a void he'd never had the courage to face. Until Emily came and then left too. Only one difference. Emily had seen through him and stayed until he pushed her away. That afternoon, James, Ethan's old assistant, stepped into the office with a brief message. "Emily and Chloe are moving to Boston next week. She got a scholarship to finish her business degree at Boston University." Ethan read it 3 times, but his heart still couldn't believe it. Boston, beyond just physical distance, far enough that, this time, it might be forever. He stood, grabbed his coat, and left the office without a word. No idea where he was going, only knowing that if he didn't do something now, there'd be no more chances. That evening, Emily was folding clothes when Chloe ran in with an envelope in hand. No sender's name, just a thin book. The Little Prince, and a note tucked between its pages. "Do you remember? That day, we talked about this book. You said it teaches people to see with their hearts. I've read it, and I've seen. The thing I want to hold on to most is the one thing I can't possess. You." Emily froze. For the first time, tears didn't fall from pain, but because someone had truly learned to love her. 3 days later, Boston's train station buzzed in the late afternoon sun. Ethan stepped onto the platform, no suit, no briefcase, carrying only a fragile hope that some people might stay, if you're brave enough to say what needs to be said. And when he saw Emily, bending down to adjust Chloe's backpack strap, the world went silent. "Emily?" he called. She looked up, stunned. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then the 3 of them stood there, amid hundreds of passengers, as if everything waited for the end of an unwritten love song. Ethan approached, his steps light, as if afraid to wake something. "I'm not here to hold you back. I'm here to go with you," he said. Emily didn't reply, but for the first time in so many days, she didn't turn away. "I'm not here to hold you back. I'm here to go with you." Those words rang out on the Boston train platform, not loud, but enough to make time freeze in Emily's eyes. In that moment, she no longer saw a CEO with a perfect tie and a packed schedule. Before her stood a man with unguarded eyes, filled with fear, regret, and an unspoken plea. "Don't walk away now that I'm ready to change." "You can't bring me back to your world," Emily whispered, her heart pounding chaotically. "I've tried to step out of it to find myself again." "Then let me step into yours," Ethan replied, his hand tightening around a piece of paper, a lease for a small office in Boston under the name EC & Co. Consulting in Young Startups. "I'll build again from scratch. Here, if you'll let me." Emily froze. Everything he'd once controlled, from a billion-dollar corporation to his own emotions, was now placed in her hands. No conditions, no force, just a timid invitation from a heart that had learned to let go to hold on to what mattered most. "I don't need anyone to save me," she said slowly. "I know, and I don't want to be a savior anymore. I want to be a partner. You'll always be the one choosing, not the one chosen." Ethan's voice grew hoarse at the end, but his gaze no longer wavered. It was direct, sincere, as if every wall he'd built had crumbled. Chloe took her sister's hand. "We can still go if you want." Emily looked down at her sister. Those innocent eyes had been her only guiding light for the past 3 years. Then she turned back to Ethan, a man who'd once been a storm, now standing like a milestone on her path, awaiting her decision. She slowly tore her train ticket in half. "Not today," she said softly, her voice trembling. Ethan exhaled, as if releasing a boulder that had weighed on his chest. Chloe clapped lightly, and Emily smiled. A faint smile, so faint but brimming with more than 1,000 promises. 6 months later, Boston glowed with autumn sun. At a small cafe near the university, Emily sat with her laptop, focused on drafting an outline for a presentation. Across the table, Ethan, in a simple sweater, helped Chloe with her biology homework, steam rising from the coffee between them, like a pause between two lives that once seemed destined never to meet. "Do you miss LeClaire?" Emily asked, eyes still on her screen. "I do," Ethan replied, not looking up. "The best panic attack of your life, right?" Ethan laughed, gently tugging her hand under the table. "From that collapse, I learned what it means to stand tall." Emily squeezed his hand, not too tight, but enough for them both to know that with each passing day they were choosing each other, not out of need, but out of trust. Because true love isn't something you hold with power, it's something you hold with courage.